Good afternoon. This is John Presco coming to you live from Springfield, Oregon. Well, when you feel bad, it's probably a good idea to maybe continue feeling bad by revealing things that make you feel bad and get them out of your system. You don't leave them stored like ammunition, so they'll waylay you, ambush you, snipe at you later on. Um, my poor father. Um, I don't think any son wants to know or read about their father being a failure, being an insecure male, because you live that. See, you sense that growing up at a very early age that your father was insecure and on his way to being a failure. And it was a big deal in our family, as Tom Snyder uh, points out in this book, art book. I don't know what this is, folks. It's not an art book. It's not a biography. I don't know what it is. Aunt Lillian's revenge against Rosemary by helping destroy her husband, whom she said she loved. I mean, I'm laughing because, one, I'm an artist. I chose to be an artist when I was 12. I chose to be a beatnik and a bohemian around the same time. I pretty much, said, hey, I want to be a failure. I don't want to make any money. I want to be lazy and an unproductive member of society. I chose this at 12 years old. And I was happy. The only thing that could have gone wrong is that my painting was chosen to tour the world in a Red Cross show, and that got some attention. And I don't think that was good. So this is my sister was an innocuous, popular, decorative artist. She did these beautiful women that people put on their walls. They sold these things like posters for $25, $50 at stores. She's just escaped me. Move on, John, when you can't remember the name of that store. My brother worked at it. So, yeah, I mean, she's not a famous artist. She's not Van Gogh, or uh, a Warhol or anything like that. She sold a lot of prints, and a lot of prints, millions of prints, at a very cheap price, and she made some money, and she got ripped off. So, and she took up art because she was an insecure woman with childless support, and she got raped at work as a restaurant waitress, and was in trouble. So she took up art as a means to make money, and she succeeded to make money. I don't think she really thought she'd be a world famous artist. Uh, so why Tom Snyder just destroys uh, Vic Presco, her father, and my father, like no male's ever been destroyed, is incredible. It's just incredible. So the only way to describe this is to read it. I can't describe it. I should have just come out and read it. Because now I see it. If I treat it like a strange bohemian art book. This is who came from Bohemia, once Anton Preskowitz. And okay, so in the days and weeks following the war's end, Dick and Vic spent long evenings, hours at Mary Rosamund's home in West Los Angeles, pondering the future. Dick was certain of only one thing: he would be a man of substance. Victor Presco seemed certain of nothing. Children came into the lives of both families: 2 boys for the Molnars and 2 for the Prescos. Born about a year apart, yet by the time Christine came along a year later in 1947, Rosemary was already treating her 2 older sons with disregard at best. The strain was also beginning to show in Rosemary's relationship with her husband and between the Molnar and Presco families. Much of the wariness and concern Lillian and Dick Molnar felt seemed from Rosemary's behavior toward her children, and they feared, especially for Christine. By age 3, Christine was already a charmer with expressive green eyes. She was also showing early signs of sensuality that would follow her throughout her life. Most, if not all, fathers recognize the physical pull of an affectionate daughter. See, I'm going to see my therapist tomorrow because I've read this again and I should be reading it. No one should be reading it because it's so disturbing. But, okay, let me continue. And most consciously or unconsciously reject the dark side that sprang from innocent play. Victor Presco did not. As young Christine climbed onto his lap or straddled his leg with obvious pleasure, Vic not only allowed, but encouraged it. If the behavior was obvious, it was ignored by Rosemary. And finally, it took the embarrassment of having Christine climb atop his leg in front of guests for Victor to act. He slapped his daughter and pushed her away with an unexpected fury that undoubtedly formed part of her lifelong terror of being rejected. Had that been the end of it, the wound might have had a chance of being healed. I say heal. See, the executive Sidney Morris at Buck and Morris, they're writing this book to increase interest in Christine's artwork, waning interest. And he believed that her fans and future fans would love to read about a little girl climbing into her father's lap and rubbing her clitoris against his leg and being slapped. This is wonderful, wonderful reading for an innocuous poster producer artist. And now we're into this utter nightmare and, destruction of the father who fathered 4 children, including a world famous artist. Do you think he's going to get any credit? You think, he's going to be esteemed at last, after he died. He died in 1994, 6 months after Christine. This book was written in 2002. But Vic found his own pleasure, Christine's attentions, and to his eternal discredit, continued on. He took her with him in the family car, on long rides that could not help but elaborate even deeper conflicts in a girl who would be burdened by them until her death. Equally important is that, like most survivors of sexual abuse, episodes would soon be blacked out in Christine's mind, remaining so for decades. Precisely how much incest was visited upon the children. Wait a minute. I thought he was just talking about Christine being incested by her father. Let's go back and read that again. Precisely how much incest was visited upon the children and grandchildren, what? By Vic and Rosemary Prescott is not known and need not be repeated here. What? Rosemary's now incesting the children? What? What is clear, though, is that the effects echo through generations of the family. Oh my God, what do you mean generations of the family? Hey, what are you talking about my daughter? This son of a bitch asshole talking about my relationship with my daughter? Huh? It is. This is libel. This is slander. This is destruction of parents, children. You know, is Tom Snyder a victim of incest? He tried to get me to sign a non-disclosure agreement so I couldn't write about my problems with my parents. You know, I lived with them for 17 years of my life. I've lived with my siblings. He's saying they got incested, and my nieces and nephews got incested by both parents, and he doesn't want me to write about it. That's maybe some kind of therapy. Is that what he's saying here? Well, yeah, he said, you know, if you don't sign this non-disclosure agreement, I've talked with attorneys, and they'll play hardball with you. I said, well, let me see if I can use honey on Mr. John Gregor Prescott, get him to sign that non-disclosure agreement and silence him so he'll never write or talk about his alleged incest with his parents. This is diabolical, folks. Absolutely diabolical. Let's see. If Rosemary had direct knowledge of Vic's behavior, she never made that public, though it could certainly have contributed to the fury she later loosed on Vic. Now, wait a minute. If Rosemary had knowledge, let's go back here. Precisely how much incest was visited upon the children and grandchildren by Vic and Rosemary Prescott is not known and need not be repeated here. Okay. If Rosemary had direct knowledge of Vic's behavior, she never made that public, though it could certainly have contributed to the fury she later loosed on Vic, along with her deepening need to control men, if only for the moment. And it must have added to the jealousy and near constant anger that Rosemary expressed towards Christine as the young girl grew ever more beautiful and vulnerable. Rosemary became her daughter's chief tormentor. More than once while visiting the Prescott home, Lillian found Rosemary beating Christine with her fists or pulling her daughter's hair out by the handful, and she was forced to drag her sister away from the child. That didn't happen. Because I did that. I had to do that. Because Rosemary caught Christine in bed having sexual intercourse with Larry Seidel. her future husband and father of her oldest daughter. Rifts are always developing. Rosemary's relationship with others, even those outside her immediate family. No doubt some of her frustration and annoyance was fueled by the difference between Vic's accomplishments compared with those of her sister's husband, Dick Monar, of her sister's husband. Dick Monar was by then doing quite well as a stockbroker, and Lillian was blooming in a way no one would have predicted from her school years spent in Rosemary's shadow. This is outrageous. How long? What have I read? Like 2 pages, and the absolute destruction of Vic and Rosemary. You just read it, and what for? What purpose does it serve? This is what art fans, art lovers want to read. They want to read this and go, "What the fuck am I reading this for? I want to read about beautiful, happy things." I can't believe Christine Rosamond had parents like this. See, and that's the contrast that they're trying to make. See, like, did it have to be made? Oh, now I get it. Oh my gosh! Every time I look at a Rosamond now, I'm gonna go think that, wow, it's much more beautiful than I thought because her parents were so ugly and dark. Oh, I love this contrast. I love looking at a innocuous $50 print of a beautiful woman that she basically used as Vogue, took a Vogue image and put it in a projector. But oh my gosh, it's so enhanced now knowing that Victor was a child molester and Rosemary beat on her. Oh, it's just such a beautiful story. Well, there's children here. See, there's Vicky right next to this language. That's my little sister who died a year ago. No one told me. So 10 days later, and that's after she was dead. So Vicky approved of this book. She contributed. She gave J.C. Perot these photographs put in the book. And after Vicky Presco died, Shannon got a hold of a lot of information that Vicky kept from her. She was very unhappy and in tears that Vicky betrayed her and stabbed her niece, Christine's eldest daughter, in the back by helping Perot denigrate her. The rest of Shannon is in this book. So you would think that the remedy is to get a lawyer and sue Tom Snyder for libel and Cindy Morris and Robert Buck for allowing this. A book of evil. I mean, it's just unredeemable. It's pornographic. You shouldn't be bringing children into this. All revelations about abuse and incest are written by the victims in books, tell-all books. You don't hire a ghostwriter to take a picture of my parents and my little sister there and then surround it with vile, alleged, incorrect, alleged incest of children, abuse of children. We're talking about abuse of children, which is against the law. That anybody would think an adult who didn't know Christine or the Prescos, he was hired, paid money to come in and dig up dirt on my family and even make things up about the abuse of children. And he did this for money. He did this for money. I mean, QAnon. Hey, QAnon. Tom Snyder right here. This is trafficking children to make money off their sexual abuse. This is what we're talking about. And how many pedophiles get a sexual thrill reading this and looking at this picture of this girl. Huh? And Aunt Lillian's, getting back at her sister Rosemary and this rivalry they all had. And that's where I got to go next, because I've had so much trouble reading about this. When I read this, that was what put me in therapy. Okay. Popular students are those who are first with something. And this point was not lost on Rosemary. She exploited every opportunity to the fullest. And if other students didn't take sufficient notice, Rosemary demanded more. I'll just continue. It was written into the relationship between Rosemary and the younger, yet attractive Lillian, that Rosemary would at all times be considered both the leader and the prettier of the two. I kid you not. I read this and I felt sick. I mean, I was literally physically and mentally ill. And I will continue. Yet, if Rosemary was glib, it was Lillian who brought home top grades. And prophylactically, if Lillian received any attention from boys, Rosemary did her best to see that it was punished. For most of their time together, Lillian accepted her supporting role as the price to pay for the chance to accompany her sister around town. The first day she did not, when Lillian actually suggested that she was also pretty, Rosemary promptly beat her up right on Main Street in downtown Ventura. Lillian learned to hold her tongue, but things were scarcely the same after that. Rosemary had a hair-trigger temper, an instantaneous rage, which would later find a more vulnerable target on Christine. For Rosemary, school was purely a social adventure, and being the most popular girl in high school would be the apex of her existence. Life throughout her earlier school years, however dressy, was merely a rehearsal. And after graduation, much of Rosemary's energy was spent in attempting to recapture the feeling of those 4 years that led up to 1939, the year of Rosemary's graduation from high school. World War II was in the wings. That was not on the minds of revelers from the San Benaventura High School graduation class. A carload of graduates, including Rosemary, headed up Highway 33 for Montegillo Hot Springs, a shady glen with a reputation to match, and were involved in a serious collision. Rosemary sustained a badly broken leg and was lucky it was not much worse. Yet she was adept at using the injury to bring as many people as possible to her bedside as she recovered during the summer. Lillian could only look on in wonder as the in thing to do in and around Ventura became visiting Rosemary. You can't place this anywhere in literature or anything. It's just abominable. It's the worst writing I've ever read. I think it's the worst writing ever read. These sentences are atrocious. I mean, this person literally should be tarred and feathered, taken to Ventura, and I think that's where he lives, and you know, put in, covered in tar, put feathers on it, put him on a pole, and run him out of town. This is a monstrous thing to take this poor woman who raised 4 children by herself and basically tar and feather, destroy her childhood, her memories, and the people that loved Rosemary. She would go back for her high school reunion, probably read this. This includes admirers, people that wanted to marry her, read this book. But as summer faded and the number of visitors and admirers dwindled, Rosemary had a clear glimpse of her future. Her graduation could lead to nothing desirable so far as Rosemary could see. She had mastered the high school game, won it outright, in fact. Now, instead of launching Point for Life that everyone else was talking about, Rosemary knew graduation only as an ending, an unwanted catalyst that would produce not the riches of popularity, but a chancy future she was ill equipped to face. And then she ended up marrying the most insecure, worst, vile man, the biggest failure of any male in the history of America, Victor Prescott, my father. This is what this book says. So, in looking for a female author, I wish I had the money to pay, for one that would just tear Stacy Perot and Tom Snyder and Cindy Morris and Robert Buck to pieces, just tear them to pieces for what they did to my family, members of my family. Absolutely atrocious. It was uncalled for. Lillian turned on her sister. She betrayed me. She had given me about 5 hours in interviews, which I taped some of it. I still have the tapes for some of it. I gave some of it back to Vicki, but I have the other tapes as proof. But it's what I'm faced with. Because my daughter got lured into this. I was encouraged to go get involved in this by her mother and her aunt and her drunken husband and probably her drunken uncle. For my daughter to be exposed to this and me made out to be a parasite and a failure by this drunk she bonded with that was born on Victor's birthday. My daughter was born on my Rosemary's birthday. But I barely survived what they did to me. And then I read this book, and I barely survived in this. So I set out to be an artist. Declared I was an artist when I was 12. and this is the end of it. I will probably never see my daughter and grandchildren. This book is the worst, most vile book ever written. That it's about art. It is a crime against art. It should be punished somehow. But failure is at the end of this road. Utter failure. And when people picked up this book, they didn't want to read that. They thought they were going to read a beautiful story about the success of a woman artist that reached the top of her field, they thought. And they wanted to read about beautiful things and beautiful parents and siblings. And they did. And the state was destroyed. The legacy of Rosamond was utterly devastated and ruined. And I can't revive it. I can't even apply therapy to it. I can't apply my 34 years of sobriety, my knowledge of codependency. I can't apply anything to it. It's done. I'm not a failure. What was done with the gift that God gave me is a failure. All right. This Poverty Show. You take care out there.